Okay, we're now going to move on, and our next presenter, who we've heard from in a question earlier, is Colin Smith, and Colin is the ICT Development Manager and Teaching and Learning Lead at a school, which I can't remember the name of, but Colin will remind us, but for the Brighter Futures Learning Partnership Trust. So I'm going to hand over to Colin, and Colin, if you'd like to get your PowerPoint up.
Great, thanks, Mark. I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of quickly just run through why it is I'm actually talking. I became a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert about 5-6 weeks ago, and that's how myself and Mark got talking, really. And really, my role at the Brighter Futures Trust is across all the schools within our trust, so from primary to sixth form. Now, I've been teaching for about 8 years, and I've been an IT professional for nearly 20. So IT was my first love, and I moved into teaching way back when. And to be honest, I wanted to take a lot of what I'd seen from an IT professional and put it into teaching. I taught computer science, I taught IT, and I really saw a real benefit to it, to the students as well. So I actually came from a background where I was a Microsoft certified technical specialist. So I was a developer by trade. I worked in networking and all sorts of other places. But now my love is in education, and it's about helping teachers, students actually get the best out of it. So that's where I've come from. Now, how it started for me, when I first started teaching, and after my career in IT, I really started to see where the pitfalls were with sort of the teaching, and particularly when I was teaching IT and computer science. There was mountains of paper, and there still is in schools, and I was trying to look for a better solution to help manage all that and just get more organized, really. And I went into one school and started to research different sort of learning platforms. The Google Education and G Suite platform came up. I installed that in the school. I configured all the accounts for the students. I taught them how to use it, and the school went on to adopt that as a platform for delivering homework, which was great. I moved schools. I became a head of department, and the IT manager there said in no certain terms, we don't use Google, we use Microsoft technology. And introduced me, said, well, have you heard of this Teams preview? And I said, well, no, but I'll have a look at it. And that's really where the kind of love affair kind of started, really. And I started to look more into how we can utilize all this technology to deliver a better experience for the students, but also to help me as a teacher keep organized within my classrooms. And I was really taken by the integration of the class notebooks from OneNote. And that really is where I started. So what I wanted to talk to you about really is about OneNote and how it's much more than just a digital notebook. Now, you may have seen some of Notebook, you might have used something yourself, you might have seen things like Evernote and things like that. They're very similar premise. The idea is that you can use this for pretty much anything, and I do. So I use it for creating worksheets that students can use throughout the lessons. I use it for my lesson content itself, so not just the worksheets, but actually for the content that I would normally put on a PowerPoint. I would embed multimedia resources, and that's been an absolute godsend through the lockdowns, particularly because you can give students a really rich experience all in one product. And I've also done things like shared schemes of work, worked with colleagues, you know, particularly if you're working in a split teaching capacity and you're sharing a group, or you are teaching 7 or 8 different groups and you're working with lots of different people. It's a great way to work together. And I really found that actually by doing all this in notebooks in OneNote, it helped me keep organized. It helped me communicate better with my colleagues. It helped us have one system and one approach that we could use. And you can do all sorts of other great things. You know, you can share resources, you can put data in there, and you can create folders for your students, which is read only. They can only see their own folder. You can have all your content in there. You can copy and paste that between them, and it really is that useful. And that's what the way I use it. Now, before I moved on to talk about the flipped classroom, I thought what might actually be useful for you actually to see it. Now, this is just kind of a demo notebook, and I've got a test student here so you can see it. This is OneNote, and I've left in the default pages for the class notebook, which tells you a little bit more information. Everything is built into Microsoft Teams as well, so Teams integrates really well with it. I've got a content library here where I've created sections, and you can color code them to match different units, and within each section you can create a set of pages. So I've got pages. Now this is a perfect example of a lesson that I've done. I've done a little bit of a recap from the last lesson. I've got a little starter where they can draw something on there. That was more to get used to the draw tools. I've got my success criteria, or lesson objectives if you like, my keywords. So not just my PowerPoint effectively, this is what students would actually work through. So I've got representations, I've got a little chart in there, discussions, boxes that they can type into, and you can see I've pasted some information from the web and it gives a reference in there, which is great. And we can do things like, if I just show you the standard algorithms page, we sign up to ClickView, works just as well with YouTube. You can embed those videos straight in the page, click play, and it plays within it. So it's a one-stop shop for absolutely everything. And I can actually, using the class notebook functionality, send this to my students. So actually, yes, I want to distribute this page to all my students, or I want to do it to a particular group to differentiate if you've got differentiated resources. And my students, when they come into the room, they would sign in, they would go to their notebooks, find the section, and the lesson is there, and they can start typing in that, and straight away they've got access to that. There's a lot of benefits to using a system like this in a classroom, in that you can see what the students are doing as they type. You can track what they've done. You can review the student work, like it says there in the class notebook, across all your students, see what they've done, how they've done. Leave your own notes in there, because like I said, it's a collaborative tool. You can actually talk to your students through it, leave them information, review their work, get them to do additional work with it. And that works really well. The real benefit of using tools like OneNote is the pedagogies that we've already got that are around today. So the flipped classroom, and I know that we've already mentioned that once this evening. If you are setting work through any sort of homework, external one, which is why I was talking about the charts earlier, if you are setting work, you don't have to necessarily set reams and reams of exam practice questions and things. You can think about how you might set new learning as part of that homework, 3 to 5 minute videos where they can read that, look at that in their own time, and then when they come into your lesson, what you are doing is you are reviewing their understanding of that work, and using things like class notebook, you can see what they've done on that page, you can track it, and it helps you, keep on top of your students as well. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that, in extending your classroom outside the time that you would normally have. From my own personal experiences, this has worked really well, particularly in IT and computer science, because students do tend to work at different times to what I do. They might work, later in the evening. They tend to ask more questions and look at more things when they've got access to it at any time and on any device. The other thing that you can do with OneNote, and this is where it really is great, is the actual integration with Microsoft Teams. Now, Teams came out of OneNote effectively in a way of actually collaborating. When you create assignments in Microsoft Teams, you can create your OneNote pages, set them as resources, and that automatically gets distributed to all your students. And when you are marking, as it shows on this screenshot here, you can flick through your students, leave them feedback, return it back to them. You can set points. You can even create rubrics to quickly mark the work, which is great. I have all particularly in IT, we have all our pass merit distinction criteria embedded within a rubric, and to mark it I would click yes, you've succeeded in this, no, you've not succeeded at this, and that was a really great way of feeding back to our students. The benefit, of course, is that it is literally all in one place. Whenever a student asks, where is it? The answer is, it's in your notebook, in your OneNote. You can access it through Teams, you can access it through OneNote.com, you can access it through the app, and it's always there. And within Teams, you get a gradebook. You can track what marks you're given for every assessment. You know, you can get all the feedback. You can see who's turned in, who's not turned in, who's even viewed it, and how many different ways they've actually viewed that as well. So it's a really great tool. And a lot of people, the first thing they say to me, say, well, that's great if you've got computers in front of you all the time, but what if you don't? What if you are a predominantly written subject? Well, one of the major things you can do here is actually submit work that you've done on paper. Really interesting, actually. I think one of the graphs we talk about setting homework online, and there's a big piece of work being done around sort of screen time at the moment. We're reluctant for our children to have so much screen time. So give them the information using the system and allow them to go away, make something or write something down, take a photograph and embed it in OneNote. In fact, in your OneNote page, if I just click on here, insert, I can insert directly from my camera or from a file that they've done or from a link online elsewhere. We can insert audio. You can get your students to record. You can record your feedback. It really is about saving time. No more worksheets, no more logging into this system, that system. Do it all in one place. That really is the crux of what I'm trying to do. And this is my own notebook as well. I've got my own notebooks where I make my lists, where I keep track of data, where I ask colleagues to kind of collaborate with me on certain aspects to keep it all in one place. And it really is a tool, a game changer for me. So that's really it. Obviously, there may well be some questions from this. The point that I'm trying to make is it's not just technology for technology's sake. I love technology. I do think it can do wondrous things, but it has absolutely transformed the way that I work and a lot of my colleagues work. And it's not about changing the way that you teach. It's about how you use your classroom routines, how the students do interact with your technology now to make it easier for you and for the students as well, not just from online, but offline as well. It can handle everything that you can throw at it. And I've put a little tiny URL in there if you want to get more information. That's linked to the Microsoft Education Centre. Lots of information, videos, training that you can do right now to help you with getting started with OneNote. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Colin. And yes, I think OneNote is one of those pieces of the Microsoft offer, which I think is, I'm not sure there's anything quite like it on the other platforms. And I think if you haven't yet had chance to really have a go at using it, you really should try, because it is, you know, it's something that's very specific. This idea of digital exercise books, digital textbook type thing, I think is something that, you know, can really help us, and we should really explore it a bit more. I've used it in the past in my own teaching and found it really, really useful because, as you said, students go to basically one place, one location for all of the notes, all the work that they've got to do. It's all going to one location, rather than what we sometimes have with technology, which is having to go to multiple different sites, have a login for this site and that site, and it becomes very confusing. So I think potentially it can actually be also a solution for inclusivity as well.
Absolutely. And one thing that we're actually trialing at the moment, our science department are doing everything this term digital. So they have iPads in their classrooms where they would deliver everything through OneNote. And so far, the feedback that we've been getting has been very, very encouraging, because the teachers can set the work through OneNote. They don't have to go to the photocopier. They don't have to, get all that prepared before the lesson. They can literally just press the button in the lesson and it distributes the notes for them. They can see what students are doing outside the classroom. We have still got some students that are self-isolating, that are extremely vulnerable, or to the other extreme where students are not in lessons because they are in isolation, if you like, or in our focus room, as we call it. They are still engaging in the lesson because they have a device in front of them. They are just not part of the population of your classroom. So there's a real time to try these things out and see how they work. And so far, I think it's encouraging. The biggest barrier to any of this is the cost. And I think that's one thing that we need to look at further. And there's lots of different ways of overcoming that. And just saving on the amount of paper that you're printing at the moment will see you some way to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to actually bring in Ross Mcgill. But Ross Mcgill has now managed to join us. We're delighted to have him here with us. And Ross has been with us all along, actually. He's been in the background watching the event live, like you all have at home, but he's had difficulties actually getting into the meeting so that he can present to you. But he's here now, and hopefully, we won't have any other issues. So getting your camera on and getting your mic working, hopefully we'll be okay with that as well. I can see you, so that's definitely working.
Can you hear me as well?
And I can hear you.
Fantastic.
So
I've literally been trying everything for the last hour and a half to get connected, but I'm here now, so it's been good watching so far.
Right, and whilst I've got you, because I think these graphs that are on the screen now, you've been seeing, we've been talking about these from the surveys we've been going along, and this fits very much in with what Colin's just been talking about in terms of electronic submission of work and this idea about devices in lessons. I think both of those graphs are particularly interesting. I just wondered what you thought of them.
There's a place for technology, but when we start to consider vulnerable kids, PRUs, there's virtual schools been around for a good 15, 20 years. What works in context. I think there's a place for technology, but I don't think it's ever going to replace that human contact. Of course, it's going to evolve and immerse the teaching profession in general. But I think, if you think of how we've all responded to the pandemic and how society has ground to a halt because parents are at home homeschooling, teachers teaching at home homeschooling their own kids and all sorts, I think there's a great opportunity for us to use technology, but sage on the stage or guide on the side, all that type of stuff. I think that physical contact with teachers, obviously technology is fantastic to reduce workload, but it also can increase workload, which I think we've all seen also. So yeah, it's good data. It's interesting.
We had one earlier, Ross, which I'm sure you heard, which was about the virtual CPD.
Yeah.
And teachers enjoying that, seemingly wanting more of it. What's your view on that as someone who's been doing a lot of it?
Well, obviously the first lockdown, we're all at home. It was unknown territory, and I was inundated with requests from all around the world, and a lot of teachers kind of sucking up CPD for themselves outside of their own school environment. And then it was very different lockdown to the small lockdown we had in November. And I've also got kind of international perspective also, but as a teacher blogger, I suppose, and accessing Teach Meets through Twitter for almost a decade now, teachers, when you compare England's provision of CPD compared to all OECD countries, we are in the bottom 5 for CPD provision, in terms of Baker and inset days. So we need to do a lot better, and schools can only do so much on budgets and time constraints and all sorts. And with you add into the mix COVID, safeguarding curriculum, and here we are in a virtual space after working hours, sharing ideas and best practice. And if we can't do this formally, then I'll pop over to Twitter and Instagram to get some ideas on my sofa. There's going to be lots of different people sharing ideas in lots of different ways, and other teachers kind of accessing ideas where they can if they're not getting it in their own school. I always say, you know, make sure you work in a school that gives you the conditions in which to grow, make sure that CPD provision is a #1 priority, and that the challenge for all schools is to give that wide diet to suit all types of school teachers in the school, that also allow them to have a degree of autonomy that meets their needs and challenges them, helps them grow. So it's yeah, interesting times. I think the best thing about all of this is all our skills have been you know, fast tracked. You know, I've been doing webinars for 10 years, although you wouldn't think so tonight with all my logging in issues, but I have, and it's been great to see, you know, even your kind of dinosaurs getting with the technology and getting logged in, and it's great to see everyone up to speed with that. So that's good news.
Thanks, Ross. I've got one question that's come in for Colin, which I think if I could get Colin to respond to. I don't know if you've seen that on the screen, Colin, but I'll just go through it. So to make what you were talking about in terms of OneNote most effective in the classroom, would students need the tech in the lessons as well? And it says, with a zero phone policy in lessons, you know, would we still need to print off resources? Effectively is the question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I don't think that it's always necessary to have these devices in the lessons, and it's never meant to replace that teacher interaction either. There is an opportunity for us to think again about how we use technology in lessons. There is a very, very good reason why a lot of schools do not allow mobile phones in lessons, to do with safeguarding, to do with being off task, not engaged. But there are other ways that we can do that, and other ways that we can manage that situation. And I think it comes down to sometimes how these devices are perceived and how we use them, and how we integrate with our behaviour systems and our AFL strategies. So there is a benefit, and no, you don't necessarily need them. And that's where you come back to this idea of the flipped classroom. It's like, you do a piece of work, you take a picture on your phone at home, you present it, and then your teacher has that all information where you can go deeper into that subject knowledge in your lesson without the technology. So you could do it both ways, I think. If it was myself, I can't, you know, I love teaching with technology in front of me. I'm very good at managing a lesson where there is technology in front of me. That's not going to be the same for everybody, but I don't think it's always necessary to get the best use of technology, because you've always got outside of your lesson as well.
Great, thanks, Colin.